Mr. Speaker, I rise to denounce so many human rights violations that are occurring throughout the hemisphere, whether it's Venezuela or my native homeland of Cuba. And as the Pope prepares for his historic trip to Cuba this weekend, he should meet with those people like the political prisoners who share common interests of peace and justice with the Catholic Church. The Church stands for liberty. It defends the freedoms of oppressed people, the freedoms to pursue one's goals and dreams without having to live in fear. But the Castro regime, it stands for the complete opposite. It stands for oppression, for violence, for hatred, for injustice. And I would urge His Holiness to meet with those who truly defend the values for which the Church stands. People like this young man, a graffiti artist, a young man who's only known communist Cuba as his government. His name is El Sexto. It means the sixth one, in reference to some other charges. El Sexto has been behind bars for nearly 9 months. He's been on a hunger strike to protest the brutal Castro regime. And what did he do? This is what he did. He had a picture of 2 farm animals, and he put the names of Fidel and Raul on them. And for that, he has been in prison with no contact with the outside world. And in January, another young man, a Cuban rapper named El Decano, was sentenced to a year in prison just because he used music to criticize the Castro regime, a regime which has not unclenched its fist against the Cuban people. And yesterday, pro-democracy leader José García Pérez, also known as Antunes, and 10 of his activists of the organization National Civic Resistance Front announced that they have begun a fast in an attempt to get a meeting with His Holiness to raise the plight of the suffering Cuban people. These are just a few of the prisoners, Mr. Speaker, who have received harsh sentences after President Obama signed and announced this ill-fated deal with the Castro regime on December 17th. Reports indicate that the Castro regime is planning on releasing more than 3,000 prisoners in advance of the Pope's visit to Cuba. And you will think, hey, that sounds like a good idea, but let's remember this. Many of those prisoners should have never been in jail in the first place. And by the way, political prisoners like El Sexto, for doing an artwork, he will not be included in that number. No political prisoners will be freed. But that's not anything new, Mr. Speaker. In 1978, Fidel Castro released almost 3,800 political prisoners ahead of Jimmy Carter's visit. In 1998, Fidel Castro released 300 prisoners ahead of Pope John Paul's visit. And in the year 2011, Raul Castro released nearly 3,100 ahead of Pope Benedict's visit. And yet the Castro regime has detained an unprecedented number of Cubans this year. So with all of these people being freed, this year, an unprecedented number of arrests in Cuba of political activists. So we can be sure that before the Pope's visit, during the Pope's visit, and after the Pope's visit, more innocent Cubans will be detained, like El Sexto, by the regime and thrown into Castro's gulags. This tactic is nothing new, and it is not indicative of a change of policy by the evil, sadistic Castro regime. It is just a political propaganda farce. Will the Pope see this cynical move for what it is? We shall soon see, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.